Hi, welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm Taisha Henry, standing in for my colleague Andrew Seaman. Before we start, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the comments. Tell us where you're from, about your career, and if you're job searching, tell us what you're looking for. This is a great time to network with each other. And throughout the show, comment your resume questions. We'll answer them live at the end. And today's guest is Robynn Storey. She's a job search strategist and resume writer. Robyn's the Robyn's the founder and CEO of Storyline Executive Resume Services. Robynn, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Robynn, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the resume writing and job strategy business.
Sure. Started 23 years ago. Actually was asked by a friend of my husband's if I could help him with his resume. I had a human resources background. He wasn't having much luck. He was an engineer, and so we sat down and talked about his career, and I created my very first resume, and that's how Storyline Resumes was born. And today, 23 years later, we've got a team of 60 staff members, and we help hundreds and hundreds of new clients every single week tell their best professional story.
And Robynn, why is creating a resume so nerve-wracking? I mean, I know I dread creating or updating my resume.
Yeah, you are not alone. It's truly a story that everyone has to tell, right? So I think the dreaded part of creating a resume is talking about yourself in a way that you're not really comfortable. You know, we're taught to be humble and gracious and sort of, low key in terms of how we talk about ourselves. And certainly a resume is your place to shine. And people have a tendency to want to talk about their job description, their job duties, where, we take a completely different approach where we're talking and telling stories about impact and turnaround and successes and things that you can measure. And, people, don't sit at home or, write their resumes and think about all the ways they've been successful. They just think about what they do every day. And we kind of help them take it across the finish line.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. It does get a bit uncomfortable trying to think about all that. I want to take a break really quickly just to say hello to some members who are joining us in the stream. We have Yolanda from Texas, Amy from Minneapolis, Sherry from Florida. We have Carrie from Colorado, Linda from Chicago, and Sandra from Georgia. Thank you all so much for joining us. And Robynn, I want to know, when it comes to writing your resume, where do job seekers even begin? Should they be creating a different resume for each company they're applying to?
Yeah, I've never really believed in that approach. I think that can make a job search extraordinarily daunting. So a lot of times people say, hey, looking for a job feels like a full-time job. It really shouldn't feel that way. I believe that if you have a couple of key things, if you've got a target, if you've got a direction, if you've got some clarity to your job search, where it is that you're going, you can tell an effective story and run one resume that you can really use for the majority of the types of positions that you're applying for. Now, a lot of people tend to get caught up in what I call the keyword game, where they're looking at job postings, they're trying to draw a correlation and use keywords that they see in the posting. That can be really sort of daunting to do over and over and over again. So I say start with a really great foundation about who you are, what you've done, where you're going, what you want, and then tell the story about your career. Because ultimately success, whether or not you're an accountant or you're a sales executive or a CEO, that is universal stuff. So it is really important that the resume that you're creating is sort of the foundation for your resume, captures everything that you've done in your career that's going to make someone pick up the phone and call you.
Yeah, having direction is so important, especially when you're applying to so many different jobs. It can be overwhelming. I know you just that answer you just gave made a lot of people happy, knowing they don't have to recreate a resume for each job they're applying to.
Right.
And Robynn, what's the biggest mistake you see people making in creating their resumes?
I think the biggest mistake that I see is sort of lack of aggression in terms of telling their story. Again, I see a lot of resumes. We get resumes all day long from people that are interested in talking with us about services or resumes that they may want us to look at. And I think the majority of resumes that I see tend to describe more their day-to-day job. So for instance, let's just say that you are a finance executive, right? And you say, I manage a budget of XYZ. Instead of just saying, I manage a budget of XYZ, tell a story about that budget, how you helped to formulate it, how you helped with cost containment, cost avoidance, saving money. Maybe you brought in new technology to help manage that budget. Anything that you've done to manage that budget in a way that no one's managed that budget before, that's the kind of stuff you want to see on your resume. Same with sales or sales manager. If you're a sales manager and you manage a team of 10 people, saying on your resume, I manage a team of 10 people, that's a duty, right? For us, we're taking it, 10 steps further than that. I manage a team of 10 people. When I arrived in this role, 7 of them were underperforming. This is what I did to bring everybody up to standard. And, now I've got 10 rock stars on my team that have, exploded sales by 200% year over year. That tells me something about you. And that's what we do.
So, Robyn, is it less about bullet points in the resume for a particular job? You're saying we should tell a story. So I think a lot of people get caught up with just putting bullet points like I did this, X, Y, Z. So is it okay in one section for a job, like you're talking about, like for me, I worked at LinkedIn. Is it more about telling a story in that section of everything you did versus just listing things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a resume still looks like a resume. People sort of expect that a resume comes in a certain format, easy to read, easy to see job titles. But in every single section of your experience, you should be telling a little backstory about that company, right? You should be telling a little bit of a backstory about your job. You should be, telling some examples of accomplishments. I love metrics. I think everyone has a metric or two that they can include on their resume. We have found through the years that hiring managers really relate a lot to numbers and results, whether it's dollars or percentages. We try to include metrics in every resume that we do. Even if you're not someone who's in a revenue producing capacity or even a cost savings capacity, that if you were a manager and you grew productivity by X%, that should be in your resume. And then tell a little story about how you did that. Nobody wants to read a novel in your resume. We limit our resumes to 2 pages. The last 3 or 4 positions that you've had are really the most important thing that you want to highlight. But absolutely take the time, use a couple of sentences and succinctly tell your story, because that is ultimately what resonates with hiring managers.
That's great advice, Robyn. And I'm seeing Anne in the comments talking about your previous point. She says, if you're super clear on what role you want, you won't be applying to hundreds of roles. And Robyn, what about people with career breaks? You recently made a post on your LinkedIn profile about a woman you worked with that had an 11-year gap. I was a stay-at-home mom myself for a while. It can be really hard to get yourself back out there. What can they do to help their resume stand out?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that, taking time off, whether or not you've taken time off to raise children, to start a business, to take care of a sick parent or whatever, you're completely within your right in your life and your career to do that. The most important thing that you need to know is that you need to tell the story about what you were doing during that period of time. And the second thing comes really more from a sort of an emotional or psychological perspective. You need to believe that the skills that you have, the value that you bring, and the work that you offer is valid. And people so often start a job search after they've had a gap, whether it's short or long, feeling like they're at a disadvantage. The most important thing on your resume is confidence. And there are certain ways to show that confidence. So if you were a stay-at-home mom and you were very involved in, a lot of volunteer activities, or you were, the head of the PTA or whatever, include it. But even if you weren't any of those things, I've seen really great sort of comical accounts of stay-at-home moms and dads, that talk about everything from, changing diapers to corralling toddlers, that I think are terrific. Don't be afraid to use humor or a really genuine approach in telling your story, because no one relates to things that are, cold, right? They relate to things that are warm and engaging. So, tell your story and then believe that you've got the skills and the knowledge and the experience and the know-how to go after the job that you want.
That's a really great point because definitely parenting is basically project management. I want to take a second really quickly to say hi to some more members joining us in the stream. We have Danielle from Orlando, Alexandra from Greece, Brittany from Minnesota, Mohammed from Lebanon, Julie from Maryland, Michelle from Alabama, and Molly from North Carolina. Thank you all so much for joining us. And remember, if you have questions about resume do's and don'ts, remember to ask them in the stream. We'll be getting to them shortly. And Robyn, I love seeing you post about your clients that were able to land jobs and that you help them level up in their career. How do you position yourself to level up in your career and show that you're ready for that, promotion and title?
Sure. I mean, look, no one is born a manager, right? I mean, we all start somewhere. As you work your way through your career and you have an idea, say you're managing a small team and now you're looking for a VP or a director level position. The things that you're focusing on in your resume are all going to be relevant to applying for director or VP level positions, whether or not that's strategy or growth or creating something new, laying the foundation. Resumes are very much like the old saying about dressing for the job that you want instead of the job that you have. And resumes are no different. So if you want to be considered for VP level or director level positions, you've got to show that you've had experiences, not necessarily experience in terms of job or job title, but experiences where you've maybe coached or mentored in an unofficial capacity, where you were selected to sit on a project team. Maybe you were asked to lead something, outside of the scope of your normal day-to-day job. All of those things are the foundation of how it is that we build your skill set in your resume that are going to allow you to be recognized for a candidate at a job at that level. That's really the key. Being able to kind of talk at that level and give examples at that level is how people transition up in their careers.
That's really interesting. So would someone put that in as a bullet form, or is it on their actual resume, or is that information that you just reveal in the interview?
Well, I think both, right? I mean, you're probably not going to get an interview unless you really look and sound and feel like a director level candidate. And I'll just use the director, as that example. So you definitely want to put that in your resume. So say you're a manager and you've got, X amount of people, or you've got such and such responsibilities, or you've got this story to tell or that story to tell. Then you kind of want to take that a step further. So in your summary statement, you're going to say, hey, I'm looking for a director level position and here's why I'm qualified. And then you want to back that up with examples. So we've all done things in our jobs that weren't in our quote unquote job description, right? Those are the kinds of things that you want to be including to help you level up. Those are the experiences, again, not experience, but experiences that are going to help people recognize that you are capable and qualified and have the skills that they need to move on in your career. And that's what you want to focus on your resume. Of course, all of the things that you do in your job and your current responsibilities and the stories that you have to tell about your success, but all of the sort of extra things or the things that you did that weren't a requirement of your job or how you went over and above. You can always ask yourself the questions. Obstacles, challenges, and opportunities. Talking about obstacles, showcasing a challenge and how you overcame it, and then an opportunity to, again, level up. How it is that you took the initiative to do something that wasn't expected. And that's the stuff that they're looking for when they're looking for those director level candidates.
Absolutely. And we have a question here from Caitlin, who's asking, is volunteer service necessary on a resume? Which leads me to my next question, which is, when it comes to recent graduates or students that are applying to internships and their first jobs, what should they include in their experience section since they don't have that traditional prior job experience?
Sure. So the volunteer experience, I'll answer first. We tend to not include a lot of volunteer experience in resumes. A lot of that stuff can be pretty subjective. I use the example, if you are volunteering for a certain political committee and the person reading your resume is on the opposite, do you really want that to be sort of a consideration that person is making about you? So unless it's been like a board position or you've been sort of head of a committee or, sort of the head of a group in a volunteer experience, we tend to leave that off of resumes. You can always talk about that in an interview if it comes up. Now, as far as young people, young professional students are concerned, First and foremost, we encourage every student, every young professional. No, we don't write resumes for young professionals, but in the past, of course, we've given lots of advice, or we've set some, expectations for what should be on a resume for a young person. You want to, number one, take advantage of as many internships as possible, right? Do as many internships as you can land. That's really great experience and something worthwhile to have on your resume. But if you have managed to graduate from college without either holding a job or doing an internship, there are certainly things that you can focus on. A lot of colleges have great programs around volunteer activities. Definitely include that on your resume. If you worked on projects where you were part of a group, include that in your resume. Any academic experiences outside the day-to-day, going to class and doing your homework and taking a test, include it. Groups that you belong to on campus, include. If you did any summertime jobs, include that. I always tell this funny story about how when my daughter graduated from college with an English lit degree, she was interviewing with major publishers, and she had interviewed with a company, and they hired people that had serving experience from restaurants. They love to see that on a resume because they felt that you came with sort of a certain skill set around customer service, which is funny, right? Because in literature, you would think I just need to know how to edit and talk and write. But for them, that was an important experience. So include everything.
Yes, expanding how you think about your experience is key. And Muhammad is asking us if we have any examples, and he's in luck. Robyn, you sent me what you think is an ideal or good resume and what it looks like. And I'd like to go over that really quickly with you. You have the skills up top, you have references that are actually on the resume, and you have education and skills at the bottom. So I just kind of want to go through this really quickly and tell me what is the strategy in the placement of the summary up top and education and skills at the bottom?
Sure. The summary up top is sort of a synopsis of this person and who they are, where they've come from, and what they consider to be their most important skills. So, this person is a director, and again, you see things around, mentorship and management, motivation, performance management, all going to be very important for someone who's going to be managing a team. And then those core competencies lists are all sort of the keywords that any of those applicant tracking systems might be looking for, but they're all, completely applicable to this person's career and their experience. And then we love, the traditional chronological view, right? The years that you were in a particular position. We love to tell a little bit of a story about the company, because not everyone is a LinkedIn, right, or an IBM, or a Fortune 500 or a blue chip company. So lots of companies need a little bit of an explanation, and what that does, that allows the reader to sort of get a sense of the kind of environment you're coming from, the kind of experience and that kind of environment that you have. And then we get into the history. Again, I love things like a turnaround story, something that you inherited that wasn't great, and you're able to give a little example of how you might have turned that around. And then for grown-ups, for instance, education always goes at the bottom, but if you're a recent graduate within a couple of years, we recommend that you put your education at the top.
And Robyn, is there a hard and fast rule on where your education should go on a resume, where the skills should go on a resume? I've heard it goes up top. I've heard it goes on the bottom. What is the first thing that you think recruiters and interviewers actually want to see up top?
I think that they want to see a summary statement, again, of who you are, where you're coming from, and what you want. I think that's the most important thing. If you graduated college within the past 2 years, your education should be at the top, because that explains a lot about what you've been doing. Now, if you're an adult and you've got, 8, 10, 12, 20, 30 years of experience in your career, your education is going to go at the bottom. The competency section, those keywords, they can really be anywhere. They should definitely be sort of sprinkled throughout the course of your resume in a logical, organic way. But I tend to love a competency section, because I think that people, I know for sure, that when we're looking at resumes, we're looking at, the job titles, we're looking at the years that you were in them, and we're looking at, the companies that you work for. That's the first thing that people are going to see. And then, we're going to do a glance over the competency section, as well as a summary statement. As interesting as you can make it, as genuine as you can make it, that's really the most important tip.
And Robin, we just saw a summary included on that example. Is that something that everyone should include on their resume?
Yeah, absolutely, because that is your elevator pitch, right? We hear so much about the elevator pitch, something that you're going to have prepared when you meet someone of interest or you meet someone that you might be interested in working with. That's sort of the resume version of your elevator pitch. Here's who I am in 30 seconds or less.
And Robin, I'd love to get to some of our member questions next. Dolores is asking, how many years of experience should we show on our resume to avoid ageism?
Sure. I mean, that is a very common question and an excellent question. We tend to go back 15 years. Since our company only really works with senior level, executive level candidates, we're talking about folks that have 20, 30, 40 years of experience. We go back in detail for about 15 years, maybe 18 years. And then if there are previous experiences that they have in terms of company-wise and job title-wise that might be of interest, we'll just do a little early career section where we leave the dates off and we'll give a few additional titles. But ageism is definitely alive and well. Applicant tracking systems pick up the dates, and people look and see those dates, and we can all do a sort of a little quick math in our heads and see how old it is that you are. So we tend to stick with 15 years.
And Tamara wants to know if she should include keywords from the job description. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, keywords for me, they're so subjective. Ultimately, job descriptions, right, are written by people. And people certainly aren't perfect in any way, shape, or form. So I use the example of, when we work with very senior executives, CEOs, or C-suite folks, a lot of times those job descriptions say, good communication skills. We're not including that in a resume for a CEO of a company. So we're, assuming that if you're leading an organization or you're leading a group of people or you're turning things around or what, that you know how to speak. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say, keyword load your resume because I think that it makes the resume a little bit messy. And I also think that, it's not something that you're going to be wanting to do for every single application. I say stick with the strongest keywords and descriptions of your characteristics, your skill set for best results. But it's like, chasing your tail to get keywords in your resume, because if you apply to 10 different jobs, they might have 10 different sets of keywords. So I say start with a really good foundation, tell a really good story. And when you do that in an organic and genuine way, you're much better off.
That's a really interesting point. I just want to clarify on that a little bit. What about people who have technical skills that are required for their jobs, such as like someone who knows a specific software or like a new software that's coming out or something like that? Is that something that they can put those kinds of keywords in the experience section, or is that something you put in core competencies up top?
Actually, most of the resumes that we create have a technology section. So if you're really great at Zoom or Salesforce, or if you were in healthcare and EMR, Cerner, Allscripts, what, those are things that you want to put. Anything that's indicative to your industry, to your role, to your company, SAP, Oracle, include all of them. I mean, we have folks that we actually get down to into the weeds. If you work in SAP, we might even list out modules that you're comfortable with. It just depends. We don't include things like Microsoft Office Suite for the most part, or things like Zoom or whatever, that are more universal. But things that are indicative to your industry or your job, absolutely include them.
And John is asking, what's your advice to those who have been out of the job market for a while and are just looking for an entry-level job?
Yeah, I mean, if you've been out of the job market for a while and you're looking for an entry level position for, I don't know situationally if this person has more experience or less experience than an entry level candidate. I think that, the most effective job search are a combination of things. It's online applications, going to company websites and seeing, what they have open and applying for jobs on there. Of course, applying for jobs through LinkedIn, and then networking. Networking is probably one of the most underutilized ways to get in front of a potential employer. I always say in an active job search, you want to be sending out or filling out at least 25 applications each week. And don't get discouraged, right? I mean, job postings might last for 30 days. You might apply on the second day. That job posting doesn't close for 30. Then that company maybe takes 2 or 3 weeks to review candidate. It might be 6 or 8 weeks until you start hearing back. I think the first thing is to not get discouraged. And the second thing is to be sort of honest and genuine in your approach. If you are an entry-level candidate applying for an entry-level job, just say that and then be able to tell a story about skills or what you think that you might bring to the party.
I think that's the motto when job searching that we all need to repeat to ourselves. Don't get discouraged. Don't
Right.
get discouraged.
I hear
And
so
I love it.
often from people, that we'll do a resume package for them. And, the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks that they have it, they're applying to a lot of jobs and they're getting a little bit discouraged. They're not getting, and then by the 6th or 7th week, they've got 11 interviews. So, there is definitely a timing issue that I think people need to be prepared for or sort of considering. And, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. You might send a resume to one person, get an interview, get a job, and that's done in 3 weeks. But for most people, it's definitely a little bit of a process. So an active job search can last really anywhere from 2 to 3 months. So when you figure in all of the things that go into that job posting, the application, and then they do the vetting process, then you might get a phone screen, then you might get called in for an interview. All of those things take time. So do not be discouraged if you do not hear back immediately. When you are using an effective resume and applying for jobs that you're qualified for, you'll hear back.
Yeah, don't get discouraged. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I
I
love
tell people to pack their patience and the sense of humor because you're going to need it.
right. And I love this question from Eric because I think it's something that many job seekers wonder about. He says, should you list each position individually within a company after multiple promotions or bullet each position under each company?
Okay, so that depends. So there could be a couple of answers to that question. So let's just say, for instance, you were with a company for 12 years and you held 4 different positions. You're going to list out each individual position. So if you started in 2000, you're going to list from 2000 to 2003, you were in this job, and then the story about that job. And then from 2004 to 2008, you're going to list that out. I tend to like to see a resume that shows different experiences within an organization because that tells me at a glance a lot of things about the candidate. And that is that there's been career progression, ascending responsibilities, really great stories to tell. So if you started out as an associate, now you're a director, I want to see the steps that you took to get there. And that job, if you were in it for 12 years or 15 years, or that company, that's really going to take up a majority of your resume. So list them out.
And Robyn, before you go, you gave us some great tips throughout the show. But if there's just one actionable thing you'd like our viewers to walk away with to help them on their job search journey or creating their next resume, what would it be?
I think the most important component of any resume is honesty and being genuine. Hiring managers relate. Anyone who is looking at your resume is going to be much more interested in talking to a candidate that feels and sounds genuine and true to themselves on their resumes. Taisha showed a little example where we use quotes on our resumes, and that gives someone an idea of who you are from a third party. So I think the more genuine you can be and the more confident, again, that you can be in the delivery of your story, the better off you'll be.
Robyn, thank you so much for joining me on Get Hired Live. You gave us so many great tips. I know our viewers, our members really appreciate it. And I probably feel a bit more encouraged now to create that next resume and update it.
Oh, thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for joining us today. We've been flashing Robyn's LinkedIn profile at the bottom of the screen so you can follow her for more resume tips and tricks. And there's no Get Hired next week, but we always have great content for you on the LinkedIn news page. On Monday, September 12th, my colleague Nina Melendez will be talking about something many job seekers experience, and that's ageism. She'll be joined by Joanne Jenkins, who is the CEO of AARP, to talk about the 50-plus workforce and how they can continue to be drivers of productivity in the US. Again, that's Monday, September 12th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time from the LinkedIn news page. Thanks again for joining us. See you soon.